you're not working hard enough is probably the piece of advice that many people would give to you when it comes to achieving some level of success. But this singular black and white thinking parroted by the masses is, for the most part, a lie. And no, I haven't made this video for clickbait. But sure, there is an element of truth to putting in the work, but this overemphasis on hard work being the key ingredient to someone's success is where I have an issue. I mean, this mindset was especially common in the older generation, where hard work was seen as a virtue of masculinity. You know, the whole strap on your boots, push through and you will be rewarded. It's a very Americanized, patriotic way of viewing success, as hard work was often seen as a badge of honor, a status symbol, rather than something which actually guaranteed success. But if we apply that logic that working hard is the determining factor to achieving quote-unquote success, then the hardest working person should be the richest, right? Well, in reality, we can see that this really isn't the case, because some of the most grueling jobs pay the least, whilst there are others who have inherited wealth or had a lucky breakthrough, who attempt to make a bold claim that they've quote-unquote worked hard for their success. And this disconnect makes it very clear that working hard alone isn't the determining factor to achieving success. But before we go into more depth, I think we should define what I mean by hard work, because most people will associate it with grinding endlessly, sacrificing sleep and pushing through exhaustion, and spending every waking hour on the grind, just hoping that one day everything will pay off. And while this mindset isn't entirely wrong, it's more so the psychology I want to address, because the idea of working harder is more of a psychological thing rather than a physical one. And what I mean by that is, it's the way in which we perceive our efforts, which plays a bigger role than you might realize. Because telling yourself this narrative that, oh, I have to do this and then I have to do that, oh, I have to do that as well, I'm working so hard, it creates this sort of mental feedback loop where it makes the task at hand a lot harder than it really needs to be. And this mindset is only reinforced by the modern hustle culture that we see today, because we're living in an age now where we're constantly bombarded with motivational success quotes on social media, and we've got stories of people that claim to sleep only 3 hours a night, because obviously if you're sleeping then you're not working hard enough. And I'm willing to bet that these type of people that claim to work 24/7, I'm sorry to say, are full of shit, because productivity shouldn't be solely about the raw input, i.e. the number of hours that you have labelled and claimed as you working hard. But in my opinion, it should be more about the quality of the input and output. And this is where, in my opinion, we have to shift our way in thinking. I mean, there's a reason why we're more advanced than animals. We have something that they don't, which is free will and consciousness, and this ability to think beyond. Because doesn't true success come from being intentional with our efforts, rather than working yourself to the ground? Because it's easy for someone from the outside looking in to look at, say, a homeless person and say that they're in that position because they didn't quote-unquote work hard enough. And while there may be an element of truth to that statement, I feel like this way of thinking can also be misleading, as it completely eliminates the other factors, such as upbringing, environment, and your natural talents. But the reality is, I've always considered myself on the lazier side. But over time, I would be someone that you can call as someone who quote-unquote works hard. And please don't take this as me bragging here or something. I'm simply stating what I've heard from others in real life when I showcase what my schedule really looks like. But the thing is, I've never really internalized it like that. I mean, to me, it just feels like a series of activities and tasks that I'm doing one after the other, just enjoying the process. And it doesn't necessarily feel like I'm putting in any extraordinary effort. It's more like something which just needs to be done for an endeavor that I truly care about. I guess for me, it's less about hard work and more about being stubborn and obsessed with the plan that I've laid out for myself. It's the reason why the advice of just work harder always rubbed me the wrong way, because it's often parroted by people who haven't really achieved much themselves. And even when successful people say it, I always don't feel like they're being completely honest, because of the reasons that I've mentioned earlier, where successful people completely downplay on the advantages they may have had when it came to their successes. And it's simply because the playing field isn't level at all, because two people can put in the effort, but one may be a lot more successful simply because they had better opportunities and a better environment to work in. And acknowledging this doesn't mean you dismiss putting in the effort that it requires to be successful at something. It's more so about seeing the bigger picture. Because when you ask these same people that have parroted the same advice of just work harder for some real actionable steps, they usually have nothing really to offer. And it's because they simply repeat the same generic line that everybody else has been repeating, without genuinely understanding what it actually takes to succeed. Now, let's talk about the real reasons why you may not be working quote-unquote hard. And you may either fall into one or both of these categories. Number one, you don't actually enjoy what you're doing. Because think back to a time where, say, you were playing that video game that you really loved. The difficulty was enough to keep you engaged, but not so overwhelming where you just simply gave up. Because when something feels rewarding, when we put in the effort, we're naturally going to put more effort in, and it's going to feel less like a grind, since we're enjoying the process a lot more. And number two is that you don't actually see the activity as important. And this is the one which is the most common. Because if you personally don't care about what you're doing, or how it may benefit you in the long run, you're probably not going to be as motivated for it. Because just think about the difference between someone who's working for survival versus another person who has just got their basic necessities met, along with a bit of luxury to keep them comfortable. Because when the stakes are high, people are naturally going to push themselves more. Not necessarily because they've suddenly discovered this sort of willpower, but more so because they quite literally have to. And this is where grit comes in. And at first glance, you may say that grit and hard work are essentially the same thing. But in my opinion, they're two fundamentally different things. Because grit isn't just about effort. It's more so about the sustained effort over a long period of time. Because it's more efficient to work at 70 or 80% of your capacity for a period of 3 years, versus you going 100% at something for 3 months, only to burn out. And this is where the compound effect comes into play. The consistent effort over time, which completely outweighs the short bursts of extreme exertion. And when we see the result of someone's sustained effort, along with the other factors that contribute to one's success, we often see that success as just coming out of nowhere, almost like it's magic. As this is something that the famous philosopher called Nietzsche once wrote: with everything perfect, we do not ask how it came to be. And Nietzsche basically argues that anyone who achieves a real level of success does so because they've directed their focus in one direction for a long period of time. And it's not about the random bursts of hard work that you put in, but about the deliberate and disciplined practice that you do every single day, day in, day out. Because like I mentioned earlier, we're living in an era where hustle culture glorifies overworking. But the reality is, constantly pushing yourself to the limit doesn't guarantee success. It guarantees burnout. Because you overworking will 100% lead to a decline in your creativity and your overall productivity. And remember, it's less about the number of hours that you've quote-unquote worked hard, but more so about doing those one or few tasks that really truly move the needle, which you can do over a long period of time, and then optimizing the workflow as you go along. I appreciate you watching the video, and if you're still interested, you can check out one of the videos that are popping up on screen right now.